The letter shook in Temperance Porter's hands, her green eyes widening as she read the unmistakable handwriting that she hadn't seen in nearly 5 years. 5 years since she'd fled her hometown in the dead of night, clutching her swollen belly, her father's threats ringing in her ears. 5 years since she'd last seen Zachary O'Connor, the rugged cowboy who'd stolen her heart during that fateful summer of 1873. And now, here he was, his words scrawled across paper, telling her he knew everything and he was coming for what was his. "He knows about Ellie," Temperance whispered, the blood draining from her face as she sank onto her modest kitchen chair. Outside, the Colorado mountain spring was blooming across the land she and her family had claimed as their own, far from Texas, far from Zachary, far from the truth. "He's found us." Temperance's mother, Ruth, snatched the letter from her trembling hands, her face hardening as she read. "That O'Connor boy has no claim on this family. Your father made sure of that." "But Ma, he's Ellie's father. All these years I've kept his letters from him, let him believe I just disappeared. What my father did, what we all did, it wasn't right." Ruth Porter's jaw tightened. "Your father saved you from ruin, girl. That ranch hand had nothing to offer you but shame and poverty." "He wasn't just a ranch hand, Ma. Zach was foreman of the Double Bar Ranch by the time I left. He was saving to buy his own land." Temperance rose, brushing back a strand of her honey-brown hair. "And now he knows he has a daughter." The sound of laughter floated through the open window, the carefree giggles of a 4-year-old girl with raven curls and startling blue eyes that matched her father's. Eyes Temperance saw every day, a constant reminder of the man she'd been forced to leave behind. "We'll leave again," Ruth declared, already moving toward the stairs. "Your brothers can have the wagon ready by nightfall." Temperance grabbed her mother's arm. "No, I'm done running, done lying. Ellie deserves to know her father, and Zach deserves to know his child." Ruth's face paled. "Your father will never allow it." "Pa doesn't rule my life anymore. I'm 23 years old, and I've built something here. Our farm is finally producing. I won't be chased away again." The sound of hoofbeats interrupted their argument, and both women turned toward the window. A rider approached from the distance, tall and broad-shouldered on a magnificent chestnut stallion. Even from this distance, Temperance recognized the set of those shoulders, the way he sat a horse like he'd been born to it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He's here. Zachary O'Connor had spent 5 long years searching for the woman who'd vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but whispers and a hole in his heart that nothing could fill. 5 years of riding from town to town, following gossip and rumors, collecting scraps of information like a man dying of thirst collects drops of water. When he'd finally gotten word of the Porter's whereabouts from a trader who'd passed through their old town in Texas, Zach had ridden like a man possessed. 3 weeks of hard travel, sleeping under stars and pushing his horse to the limit, all to find the woman who'd haunted his dreams. All to discover if the rumors were true that she'd been carrying his child when she disappeared. Now, as he approached the modest homestead nestled in the shadow of the mountains, Zach felt a curious mix of anger and hope churning in his gut. The farm was well kept, with fields freshly plowed for spring planting, a sturdy barn, and a small but solid house with smoke curling from the chimney. It spoke of hard work and determination qualities he'd always admired in Temperance. A movement caught his eye, a small figure darting between the clotheslines, chasing a butterfly with outstretched hands. A little girl with dark curls bouncing as she ran. Something seized in his chest, squeezing so tight he could barely breathe. Even from this distance he knew that was his child, his daughter. The daughter he'd never known existed until 3 months ago, when a drunken confession from Temperance's youngest brother in a saloon in Austin had changed everything. Zach dismounted at the gate, his legs suddenly unsteady beneath him. The little girl had stopped her chase, watching him with curious eyes he recognized from his own reflection. Blue as the Texas sky, his mother had always said, O'Connor eyes. Before he could speak, the front door of the house burst open, and there she was, Temperance, more beautiful than his memory had painted her. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple knot, her face more mature than the 19-year-old girl he'd loved, but her green eyes were just as bright, just as captivating. "Zach," she breathed, and the sound of his name on her lips nearly undid him, but he hadn't ridden across half the country for tender reunions. He'd come for answers, for justice, for his child. "Is she mine?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion as he nodded toward the little girl who was now hiding behind her mother's skirts, peering at him with those familiar blue eyes. Temperance lifted her chin, defiance and something like shame crossing her features. "Yes, this is Eleanor Rose, your daughter." Zach knelt down, his eyes level with the little girl's. Years of anger and resentment melted away as he looked into that innocent face, a perfect blend of himself and the woman he'd never stopped loving. "Hello, Eleanor," he said softly. "My name is Zachary O'Connor, and I'm your father." His voice broke on the last word. "I'm here now." Temperance felt her heart splinter as she watched her daughter peer curiously at the stranger, claiming to be her father. Ellie had always asked about him, and Temperance had told her stories, sanitized versions of the truth, tales of a cowboy who'd had to go on a long journey before she was born. She'd never expected to have to face this moment, to watch her daughter meet the man who'd helped create her. "Mama says you ride horses," Ellie said, her small voice clear and unafraid. A smile broke across Zach's weathered face, transforming it from hard to handsome in an instant. "I do. I have a fine horse right there. His name is Rusty. Would you like to meet him?" Ellie nodded eagerly, but Temperance placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Perhaps later. It's nearly time for supper." She looked up at Zach, steeling herself against the accusation in his eyes. "You're welcome to join us if you'd like. We have things to discuss." "Damn right we do," Zach said, his voice low enough that only Temperance could hear the anger simmering beneath his words. The sound of a rifle being cocked shattered the moment. Temperance turned to see her father, Samuel Porter, emerging from the barn, the weapon trained on Zach. "You're not welcome here, O'Connor," Samuel growled. "Get back on that horse and ride out the way you came." Zach straightened slowly, his hands carefully visible at his sides. "I'm not here for trouble, Mr. Porter. I'm here for my daughter." "You have no daughter here," Samuel spat. "Just a fatherless child my girl took in out of Christian charity." Rage flashed across Zach's face. "Is that the lie you've been telling, sir? Because anyone with eyes can see that child has my blood." "Pa, put the rifle down," Temperance pleaded, pushing Ellie behind her. "Not in front of Ellie." Samuel's eyes flickered to his granddaughter and the rifle lowered slightly. "Get inside, Temperance. Take the girl." "No," Temperance's voice was quiet but firm. "Zach deserves to know his daughter, and Ellie deserves to know her father." "After what his kind did to this family?" Samuel's voice shook with barely controlled fury. "Have you forgotten how the O'Connors ruined your brother, left him in the dirt to die?" Zach's expression hardened. "My father's actions aren't mine, sir. I never approved of what happened to Thomas Porter, and you know it. I tried to help him." "Help him into an early grave." Samuel raised the rifle again. "Pa!" Temperance moved between the two men. "That was 15 years ago. Thomas made his choices, and Mr. O'Connor paid for his. This blood feud has gone on long enough." Ruth appeared in the doorway, her face tight with anxiety. "Samuel, the child is watching. Whatever needs to be said can be said inside, like civilized folks." For a tense moment, Temperance thought her father might refuse. Then, with a muttered curse, he lowered the rifle. 1 hour. Then he's gone. Relief washed through Temperance as she turned to Zach. "Come inside, please." The tension in the Porter kitchen was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ellie had been sent to play in her room after being introduced to the stranger as an old friend of Mama's, but the adults around the table sat in uneasy silence, each waiting for someone else to speak first. Zachary studied the cup of coffee Ruth had grudgingly placed before him, trying to contain the storm of emotions raging inside. Across from him, Temperance sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes downcast. Samuel Porter stood by the window, refusing to sit, his hand never far from the rifle he'd propped against the wall. It was Ruth who finally broke the silence. "How did you find us?" Zach looked up, meeting the older woman's cold gaze. Your son Jacob has a loose tongue when he's in his cups. Ran into him in Austin 3 months back. He didn't tell me where you were, but he let slip enough that I could start looking in the right places. Samuel cursed. That boy never could hold his liquor. I would have found you eventually, Zach continued, his eyes moving to Temperance. I never stopped looking. Temperance's gaze lifted to his, and the pain he saw there made his anger falter. Why? She whispered. After I left without a word. Why would you keep searching? Because I loved you, Zach said simply. Because one day you were promising to meet me by the old oak to run away together, and the next you'd vanished. No goodbye, no explanation. I knew something was wrong. Ruth made a small sound of distress, but Samuel silenced her with a look. And now I find out you were carrying my child. That for nearly 5 years, I've had a daughter I knew nothing about. Zach's voice hardened. I have a right to know why. You have no rights here, boy, Samuel growled. My daughter made her choice. Did she? Zach challenged, never taking his eyes from Temperance. Or did you make it for her? Temperance's lips trembled as she finally spoke. I wanted to tell you. That night we were supposed to meet, I was going to tell you about the baby. But my father... She glanced at Samuel, whose face had turned to stone. He convinced me it would be better for everyone if we left. That you weren't ready to be a father. That we'd only bring each other pain because of the history between our families. Convinced you? Zach's voice was dangerously quiet. Or threatened you? A tear slipped down Temperance's cheek. Both. I protected my daughter, Samuel said. Your father ruined one of my children. I wasn't about to let his son ruin another. Zach slammed his fist on the table, making the cups rattle. I am not my father. Thomas Porter cheated mine at cards and pulled a knife when he was called on it. What happened after was wrong, yes, but I had nothing to do with it. I was 13 years old. Your blood is tainted, Samuel insisted. O'Connors have been bringing misery to Porters for 2 generations. Pa, stop it. Temperance's voice cut through the argument. The feud between our families was never Zach's doing. He's always been kind and honorable. She turned to Zach, her eyes pleading. I should have been stronger. Should have found a way to tell you, but I was 19, scared, and my father threatened to disown me if I didn't leave with the family. I had nowhere to go, no money of my own. Zach felt his anger softening despite himself. He remembered how powerful Samuel Porter had been in their small Texas town, how completely he'd controlled his family. And he remembered how young Temperance had been, how sheltered. You could have come to me, he said quietly. We could have faced it together. And lived how? Samuel demanded. A disgraced girl and a ranch hand with no prospects? What kind of life would that have been for a child? I wasn't just a ranch hand, Zach said, steel entering his voice. I was foreman of the double bar by the time Temperance left, and now I own half of it. This clearly took the Porters by surprise. Ruth's eyebrows rose, and even Samuel looked momentarily taken aback. After you disappeared, Zach continued, looking at Temperance, I worked myself nearly to death, took on extra jobs, saved every penny. Old man Barton had no sons, and his daughter had no interest in ranching. 2 years ago, he offered to sell me half the ranch, with the option to buy the rest when he's gone. I own 5,000 acres of prime Texas grazing land now, Temperance. I could have given you and Ellie a good life. Fresh tears spilled down Temperance's cheeks. I didn't know. You didn't try to find out, Zach said, the hurt evident in his voice. You just let me believe you'd stopped loving me. Ruth placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. What's done is done. The question is, what happens now? Zach straightened in his chair, his decision already made. I want to know my daughter. I've missed 4 years of her life. I won't miss any more. And how do you propose to do that? Samuel demanded. We're settled here. This is our home now. I'll stay as long as it takes, Zach said firmly. There's a town nearby, I assume. I'll find lodging there, visit every day until Ellie knows me. And then what? Temperance asked, her voice small. Take her away from the only home she's ever known? Zach met her gaze steadily. I want her to know her father, Temperance. How that happens. We'll have to figure it out together. Samuel made a sound of disgust. This is absurd. The girl is settled here. She doesn't need some stranger disrupting her life. I'm not a stranger, Zach said, his voice rising. I'm her father. And I have rights. Rights? Samuel scoffed. You have no legal claim on that child. No court would side with you over her mother. I could try, Zach threatened, though the thought of dragging Ellie through such a battle made his stomach turn. But I'd rather not put her through that. Temperance stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. Stop it, both of you. Ellie isn't some prize to be fought over. She's a little girl who needs both her parents. She turned to Zach, her expression softening. You can stay in our barn for tonight. It's getting late and the ride to town is long. Tomorrow we can start figuring out how to make this work. Samuel looked ready to protest, but Ruth laid a restraining hand on his arm. Temperance is right. The child comes first. Zach nodded slowly, relief washing through him. It wasn't everything he wanted, but it was a start. Thank you. Temperance wiped away her tears and straightened her shoulders. I'll show you where you can put your horse, and then, perhaps you'd like to say goodnight to Ellie before she goes to sleep. The simple offer, the chance to tuck his daughter in for the first time, made Zach's throat tighten with emotion. I'd like that very much. As they walked out into the fading light, leaving her parents in the kitchen, Temperance felt as if she were balancing on the edge of a knife. Zach walked beside her, his presence both achingly familiar and disturbingly foreign. This was the man she'd once planned to spend her life with, the father of her child, and yet, in many ways, he was a stranger now. Your farm looks prosperous, Zach commented as they crossed the yard toward the barn. You've done well for yourselves here. Temperance nodded, grateful for the neutral topic. It's been hard work, but the soil is good. We grow mostly wheat and vegetables. My brothers raise some cattle on the north pasture. And you? What do you do besides raise our daughter? The possessive phrase "our daughter" sent a shiver down Temperance's spine. I keep the books for the farm, and I teach Ellie and some of the neighboring children their letters and numbers 3 days a week. Zach smiled slightly. You always did have a way with figures. I remember how you helped me calculate the double bars cattle tallies that summer. The memory brought warmth to Temperance's cheeks. They had spent many evenings together in the ranch office, heads bent over ledgers, their shoulders touching. Those innocent moments of closeness had been the beginning of their love story. Zach, she said suddenly, stopping before they reached the barn, I need you to know something. I never stopped loving you. Leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. His expression darkened. Then why did you do it? Your father's threats aside, you could have found a way to send word. A letter, a message with a traveler, something to let me know about my child. Temperance closed her eyes briefly, the guilt she'd carried for years washing over her afresh. At first, I was just trying to survive. The journey here was difficult, especially in my condition. Then Ellie came, and those early months were a blur of exhaustion. By the time I thought about contacting you, a year had passed, and I convinced myself it would be cruel to disrupt your life when you'd surely moved on. Moved on? Zach's voice was incredulous. Temperance, I loved you with everything I had. When you disappeared, it nearly destroyed me. I've spent 5 years looking for you, wondering what I did wrong, why you left. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears threatening again. I was young and frightened, and I listened to my father when I should have listened to my heart. Something in Zach's expression softened. Your father can be a formidable man. I remember that well enough. They had reached the barn door, and Temperance pushed it open, revealing the clean, well-kept interior. Several stalls housed the farm horses, and fresh hay covered the floor. You can put your horse in the empty stall at the end, she said, gesturing. There's grain in the bin beside it. Zach led his chestnut stallion into the barn, removing the saddle with practiced ease. As he tended to his horse, Temperance found herself studying him. He'd filled out in the years since she'd last seen him, his shoulders broader, his frame more solid. The boyish cowhand had become a successful rancher, apparently. His dark hair was longer than she remembered, curling slightly at the collar of his shirt, and a short beard now covered his jaw, making him look older, more distinguished. "You've changed," she said softly. Zach glanced over his shoulder. 5 years will do that. He finished with his horse and turned to face her fully. "You've changed too. You're not the girl I knew anymore." "No," Temperance agreed, "I'm not. Motherhood has a way of growing a person up quickly." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with all the things unsaid, the years unlived together. "I should take you to say goodnight to Ellie," Temperance finally said. "She's usually asleep by sundown." Zach nodded, brushing hay from his hands. "Temperance, before we go in, I want you to know I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to know my daughter, to be part of her life." "And how long will you stay?" she asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since his arrival. "You have a ranch in Texas. A life there." "I have a capable foreman running things," Zach said. "I can stay as long as necessary." "And what exactly are you hoping for? What's your plan?" Zach ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Temperance's heart ache. "Honestly, I don't know. When I rode out here, I was angry. I thought I might find you, confirm the child was mine, and then I hadn't thought much beyond that. Maybe take her back to Texas with me." Temperance's breath caught. "I won't be separated from my daughter, Zach." "I understand that now," he said quickly. "Seeing you with her, I know you're a good mother. Taking her from you would be wrong." He hesitated. "But I can't just walk away either. Not now that I've seen her. Not now that I know she's mine." "So we're at an impasse." Zach took a step closer, close enough that Temperance could smell the familiar scent of him, leather and horses and open sky. "Maybe not. Maybe there's a middle way, if we're both willing to compromise." Before Temperance could ask what he meant, the sound of the house door opening interrupted them. Ellie's small voice called out, "Mama, are you in the barn?" "Coming, sweetheart," Temperance called back, then turned to Zach. "Are you ready for this?" A look of nervous anticipation crossed his face. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together, they walked out of the barn to where Ellie stood on the porch in her nightgown, her dark curls framing her face. When she saw them, she smiled a smile so like Zach's that Temperance heard his sharp intake of breath beside her. "Mama says you're staying in our barn tonight," Ellie said to Zach as they approached, "and that you're going to tell me a bedtime story." Temperance shot Zach an apologetic glance. "I hope that's all right. She loves stories." The look of pure joy that transformed Zach's face was answer enough. "I know lots of stories about cowboys and horses," he told Ellie, kneeling down to her level. "Would you like to hear one of those?" Ellie nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, please. Mama says you're a real cowboy. Do you have a gun and everything?" Zach chuckled. "I do, but I don't use it much. Mostly I take care of cows and horses." "I like horses," Ellie declared. "Grandpa says I'm too little to ride by myself, but sometimes he lets me sit in front of him on his horse." "Is that so?" Zach glanced at Temperance. "Well, maybe tomorrow I could show you my horse, Rusty. He's very gentle." Ellie's eyes lit up. "Could I ride him?" "With me holding you, and if your mama says it's all right." Ellie immediately turned pleading eyes to Temperance. "Can I, Mama? Please." Temperance couldn't help but smile at her daughter's excitement. "We'll see. For now it's time for your story, and then bed." As they entered the house, Temperance noticed her parents had retreated to their bedroom, leaving the main room empty. A small mercy, she thought. Introducing Zach to Ellie would be complicated enough without Samuel's hostility adding tension to the moment. Ellie's room was small but cozy, with a handmade quilt on her bed and a wooden horse that one of her uncles had carved sitting on the windowsill. She climbed into bed and looked expectantly at Zach, who seemed momentarily overwhelmed by the simple domesticity of the scene. "What kind of story would you like?" he asked, his voice slightly unsteady as he sat in the chair beside her bed. "One with horses," Ellie said promptly. "And adventure," Zach smiled. "I think I can manage that." He cleared his throat and began a tale about a brave pony who saved his rider from a flash flood. As he spoke, his rich voice painting vivid pictures, Temperance watched her daughter's face. Ellie was enthralled, her blue eyes Zach's eyes wide with wonder. And watching Zach, seeing the tenderness in his expression as he told his story, Temperance felt something shift inside her. Something that had been broken for a very long time began, tentatively, to heal. By the time Zach finished his story, Ellie's eyelids were drooping. He hesitated, then reached out to gently smooth a dark curl from her forehead. "Good night, Eleanor," he said softly. "Good night," Ellie murmured, already half asleep. "Will you tell me another story tomorrow?" "If your mama says it's all right, I'd be happy to." Temperance nodded from where she stood in the doorway. "Of course. But now it's time to sleep, little one." Ellie's eyes closed fully, and within moments her breathing deepened into sleep. Zach remained seated beside her, simply watching her face with an expression of wonder. "She's perfect," he whispered finally, looking up at Temperance. "She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "She is," Temperance agreed, her throat tight with emotion. "And she's so much like you, Zach. Not just her eyes, but her spirit. She's fearless and kind, just like her father." Zach stood slowly, taking one last look at his sleeping daughter before following Temperance out of the room. In the main room of the house they stood awkwardly, neither quite knowing what to say. "Thank you," Zach said finally, "for letting me be part of her bedtime, for not turning me away when I showed up out of nowhere." Temperance sighed. "I've done you enough wrong, Zach. I won't keep you from your daughter now that you've found her." "And what about her mother?" Zach asked quietly. "Where do we stand, Temperance?" The question hung between them, loaded with 5 years of separation and unspoken feelings. Temperance looked into the face of the man she'd never stopped loving and saw both the familiar and the new, the boy she'd fallen for, and the man he'd become. "I don't know," she admitted. "There's so much history between us now, so many complications." "But there's Ellie," Zach said, "and there's this." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. Temperance closed her eyes at the contact, her body remembering his touch even after all this time. "I should go," she whispered, stepping back. "It's been an overwhelming day for everyone. We can talk more tomorrow." Zach nodded, though reluctance was clear in his expression. "Tomorrow, then. Good night, Temperance." "Good night, Zach." As she walked back to the house, leaving him to settle in the barn, Temperance felt as though her carefully constructed life was shifting beneath her feet. Zach's return had changed everything, and what tomorrow would bring, she couldn't begin to guess. Dawn broke clear and crisp over the Colorado foothills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Zach had barely slept, his mind too full of the events of the previous day, finding Temperance, meeting his daughter, the tentative truce with the Porter family. He'd spent the night on clean hay in the barn loft, comfortable enough physically but restless with thoughts of what might come next. He rose early, tending to his horse and then helping himself to water from the well to wash up. As he splashed cold water on his face, he heard the farmyard coming to life, chickens clucking, a cow lowing, the sound of the kitchen door opening and closing. Temperance emerged from the house, dressed in a simple blue dress with her hair braided and pinned up. She carried a basket over one arm and hesitated when she saw him, as if unsure of her welcome. "Good morning," she called, crossing the yard toward him. "I brought you some breakfast. I thought you might be hungry." Zach dried his face on his bandana and smiled. "That's kind of you. Thank you." Temperance handed him the basket, which contained fresh bread, cheese, and a jar of preserves. "It's not much, but it'll tide you over until proper breakfast. We usually eat together after the morning chores are done." "Am I invited to that?" Zach asked, raising an eyebrow. "Your father seemed less than enthusiastic about having me around." A shadow crossed Temperance's face. "Pa is struggling with all this, but he's agreed to be civil for Ellie's sake." "That's something, I suppose." Zach took a piece of bread from the basket. "Where's Ellie this morning?" "Still sleeping. She's usually up with the sun, but she was so excited about meeting you yesterday that she had trouble settling down." Temperance's expression softened. "She asked about you first thing when she woke in the night. Wanted to know if you were really staying in our barn, like a story come to life. Warmth spread through Zach's chest at the thought. And what did you tell her? The truth, that you're a friend who's come to visit us and that you're very interested in getting to know her. Temperance hesitated. I haven't told her who you really are yet. I thought we should do that together, when the time is right. Zach nodded, relieved by her thoughtfulness. I'd like that. I don't want to confuse her or rush things. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of their shared past and uncertain future hanging between them. What are your plans for the day? Temperance finally asked. I thought I might ride into town, get the lay of the land. Maybe see about longer-term accommodations. Zach studied her face. Unless there's something else you think I should do. Temperance twisted her hands in her apron. Actually, my brothers could use help mending the north fence. A tree came down in the last storm and took out a section of it. If you're willing, that is. I'd be happy to help, Zach said, surprised but pleased by the invitation. It would give me a chance to get to know your brothers better. I'm assuming they don't all share your father's opinion of me. Jacob is the youngest. He was just a boy when we left Texas. He barely remembers you. Matthew and Luke are more reserved, but they're fair men. They'll judge you on your own merits, not on old grudges. And they know about Ellie? That she's mine? Temperance nodded. They know. They've always known. She glanced toward the house. I should get back. Ellie will be up soon, and I need to help Ma with breakfast. The men usually eat around 7. I'll be there, Zach promised. And Temperance? Thank you for being willing to try to make this work. A small smile touched her lips. She's your daughter too, Zach. She deserves to know you. With that, she turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Zach to wonder if there might be hope for more than just a relationship with his daughter. Breakfast at the Porter farm was a tense affair. Samuel sat at the head of the table, barely acknowledging Zach's presence, while Ruth served platters of eggs, bacon, and biscuits with mechanical efficiency. Temperance's brothers Matthew, Luke, and Jacob eyed Zach with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. Only Ellie seemed genuinely delighted by his presence, chattering happily about her toys and asking Zach endless questions about his horse. Can I see him after breakfast? She asked, bouncing in her seat. You promised. If it's all right with your mother, Zach said, glancing at Temperance. After you finished your breakfast properly, Temperance told her daughter with gentle firmness, and only for a little while. Then you need to do your lessons while I help Grandma with the washing. Samuel cleared his throat. O'Connor will be helping your uncles with the north fence today, Ellie. He won't have time for horsing around. Ellie's face fell, but Zach quickly intervened. I'm sure I can spare a few minutes to introduce Ellie to Rusty before I head out with your brothers, Mr. Porter. If that's acceptable? Samuel grunted, which Zach took as grudging assent. The rest of the meal passed in uncomfortable small talk, with Temperance and Jacob making most of the effort to keep conversation flowing. When the plates were cleared, Matthew and Luke stood. We'll be loading the wagon with supplies, Matthew said, nodding to Zach. Meet us out front when you're ready. I appreciate the opportunity to help, Zach said sincerely. I'll just show Ellie my horse first, as promised. The brothers nodded and left, followed by Samuel, who departed without a word. Ruth began clearing dishes with tight-lipped efficiency, leaving Temperance, Zach, and an excited Ellie at the table. Can we go now, Mama? Ellie pleaded. Please? Temperance smiled. Yes, go get your shawl. It's still chilly out. As Ellie scampered off, Zach leaned closer to Temperance. I don't want to cause problems between you and your parents. You're not, she assured him, though her voice lacked conviction. They'll adjust. It's just a shock having you here after all this time. For me too, Zach admitted. Yesterday I was still searching. Today I'm trying to figure out how to be a father to a child who doesn't even know I am one. Temperance's expression softened. You're doing fine, Zach. Better than fine. Ellie already likes you, and that's half the battle. Ellie returned, wrapped in a small blue shawl, her eyes bright with excitement. I'm ready. The three of them walked out to the barn together, and Zach couldn't help but think how right it felt like the family they should have been all along. Inside, Rusty nickered softly when he saw Zach pushing his nose over the stall door. He's so big, Ellie gasped, stopping a few feet away. Zach knelt beside her. He may be big, but he's gentle as a lamb. Would you like to pet him? Ellie nodded, though she still looked uncertain. Zach lifted her into his arms, surprised by how natural it felt to hold his daughter, and carried her closer to the horse. Hold your hand flat like this, he demonstrated. Let him smell you first. That's how horses say hello. Ellie giggled as Rusty's soft muzzle tickled her palm. He's sniffing me. That's right. Now you can pet his nose, gentle like this. Zach guided her small hand in a soft stroke down Rusty's face. He's soft, Ellie exclaimed in delight. Not prickly like Uncle Matthew's beard. Zach laughed, glancing at Temperance, who was watching them with a mixture of happiness and something that looked almost like longing. For a moment, their eyes met over Ellie's head, and an understanding passed between them. This was how it should have been from the beginning. This moment, and 1,000 others like it, had been stolen from them. Can I ride him? Ellie asked, bringing Zach's attention back to his daughter. Not today, little one, he said regretfully. I need to help your uncles with their work. But maybe tomorrow, if your mama says it's all right, we could go for a short ride together. Ellie turned pleading eyes to her mother. Can we, Mama? Please. Temperance hesitated, then nodded. A short ride, with Zach holding you securely, and only if you're good today and do all your lessons without complaining. I will, Ellie promised fervently. I'll be the best girl ever. Zach set her down reluctantly, already dreading the separation from his newly discovered daughter. I should go help your uncles now, but I'll see you at supper, all right? Ellie nodded solemnly. Don't forget about our ride tomorrow. I wouldn't dream of it. Zach touched her curly head gently, then straightened and met Temperance's gaze. Thank you. She nodded, understanding all that he was thanking her for the moment with their daughter, the promise of tomorrow, the chance to be part of their lives. As Zach walked toward the front of the farm where the Porter brothers were loading a wagon with fence posts and tools, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Somehow, he would find a way to be a father to Ellie. And perhaps, if the tentative warmth he'd seen in Temperance's eyes was any indication, he might find a way back to her heart as well. The north fence line ran along a creek that marked the boundary of the Porter property. The damage was extensive. A large oak had fallen across the fence, crushing several posts and snapping wires. Zach worked alongside Matthew and Luke in companionable silence for most of the morning, clearing debris and digging new post holes. Jacob joined them later, bringing a jug of water and news from the house. Ma's in a state, he reported, passing the water around. Keep slamming pots around in the kitchen. Pa's gone into town, probably to avoid the storm. And Temperance? Zach asked, trying to sound casual. Jacob grinned, his resemblance to his sister striking when he smiled. Teaching Ellie her letters. That kid's been working harder than I've ever seen her, determined to earn that horse ride you promised. The older brothers exchanged glances but said nothing, continuing their work on the fence. As the day wore on, the men fell into a rhythm, and gradually the silence between them eased into occasional conversation. You own half the double bar now? Matthew asked as they set a new post. That's impressive for a man your age, Zach nodded, tamping down the soil around the post. Been working toward it since I was 16. Old man Barton recognized hard work, gave me opportunities. I started as a regular hand, worked my way up to foreman by 20. Temperance mentioned you were foreman when she left, Luke said, his tone neutral, but his eyes assessing. Said you had plans to buy your own place someday. That was the dream we shared, Zach confirmed, meeting Luke's gaze steadily. I was saving for land, planning to ask her to marry me that summer. He paused, the old pain resurging. Then she disappeared. Matthew straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. Pa can be a hard man when he sets his mind to something, especially where his children are concerned. She told me he threatened to disown her if she didn't leave with you all, Zach said, watching their reactions. Jacob nodded grimly. That's true enough. When he found out she was in the family way, he was fit to be tied, ranted about O'Connor blood and family shame. He looked apologetically at Zach. No offense meant. None taken. I understand there's bad history between our families. History that wasn't your doing, Luke pointed out. surprising Zach with his fairness. Thomas's death was a tragedy, but even Pa knows deep down that your father was provoked. Thomas had a wild streak, liked to gamble more than was good for him. Still, a man shouldn't die over a card game, Matthew added soberly. No, Zach agreed, he shouldn't. And if I could change what happened, I would. But I can't. All I can do is try to be a good man myself and a good father to Ellie, if you'll all give me the chance. The three Porter brothers exchanged looks, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Matthew spoke for them all. Ellie's a special girl. Sunshine of this whole farm. If you're truly here for her to be the father she deserves, then you'll get no trouble from us. His expression hardened slightly. But if you're just passing through, planning to disrupt her life and then leave again. I'm not, Zach interrupted firmly. I have every intention of being a permanent part of her life. How that works practically, well, that's what I need to figure out with Temperance. And what are your intentions toward our sister? Luke asked bluntly. Zach considered his answer carefully. I loved her 5 years ago, enough to want to spend my life with her. Those feelings don't just disappear. He drove a nail into the fence post with perhaps more force than necessary. But I also know we're different people now. She has a life here, and I have responsibilities in Texas. Whatever happens between us needs to be her choice, freely made this time. Jacob clapped him on the shoulder. Fair enough. Just know that if you hurt either of them, you'll have us to answer to blood feud or no blood feud. Zach nodded, accepting the warning for what it was not a threat, but the natural concern of brothers for their sister and niece. Understood. They worked through the rest of the afternoon, completing the fence repair as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. By the time they packed the tools back into the wagon, a tentative camaraderie had developed between Zach and the Porter brothers, not friendship exactly, but a mutual respect that gave him hope for the future. As they rode back toward the farmhouse, Jacob pulled his horse alongside Zach's. Pa will be a harder sell than us, he said quietly, but Mom might come around if she sees you're serious about Ellie. And Temperance. He hesitated. She never stopped missing you, you know, even after all this time. Zach's heart lifted at the words. Thank you for telling me that. Just don't waste this second chance, Jacob advised. They don't come along often in this life. When they arrived back at the farm, Zach spotted Temperance and Ellie in the kitchen garden, harvesting early spring greens. Ellie saw him first, dropping her small basket and running toward him with a joyful cry. You're back! Did you fix the fence? Mama says I did all my lessons perfectly. Can we ride your horse tomorrow? Zach laughed, swinging down from his saddle and kneeling to receive her enthusiastic hug. Over her head, he met Temperance's gaze, seeing the surprise and something like hope in her expression. Yes to all of those questions, he told Ellie, his heart full. The fence is fixed, and if your mama says you did well on your lessons, then of course we can ride tomorrow. I did say that, Temperance confirmed, approaching them with her basket of greens. Ellie was extremely dedicated to her studies today. That's my girl, Zach said without thinking, then glanced quickly at Temperance, worried the endearment might have overstepped. But she was smiling, a soft, private smile that made his heart race. Supper will be ready soon, she said. You're welcome to join us again, if you'd like. Behind them, Matthew cleared his throat. O'Connor did good work today, earned his place at the table. Temperance's eyebrows rose slightly at this endorsement from her usually taciturn brother. I'm glad to hear it. As the Porter brothers led their horses toward the barn, Zach stood with Temperance and Ellie in the golden light of late afternoon, feeling for the first time that perhaps there was a place for him here, not just as Ellie's father, but as part of this family. Would you like to help me gather eggs for tomorrow's breakfast? Temperance asked Ellie. Zach can come too, if he wants to learn about our chickens. I'd like that, Zach said, grateful for any opportunity to spend time with them. As they walked toward the chicken coop, Ellie between them, chattering about her favorite hen, Zach felt a contentment he hadn't experienced in years. This was what he'd been searching for, even when he hadn't fully understood what he was missing, not just Temperance, not just the knowledge of his child, but this sense of belonging, of family. Now he just had to figure out how to keep it. The evening meal was less tense than breakfast had been. Samuel was still cool toward Zach, but he no longer actively glared across the table. Ruth had thawed slightly, even offering Zach seconds of her rabbit stew. The conversation flowed more naturally, with Matthew and Luke discussing the progress on the fence and Jacob entertaining everyone with news from town. Throughout the meal, Zach found his gaze repeatedly drawn to Temperance, seated across from him. She seemed more relaxed than she had been the previous day, laughing at her brother's jokes and gently correcting Ellie's table manners. Once or twice, she caught him watching her and held his gaze for a moment before looking away, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. After the meal, when Ellie had been tucked into bed with another of Zach's stories, Temperance suggested they take a walk in the moonlight. "There's a pond just beyond the orchard," she said. "It's peaceful there, and we could talk privately." Zach agreed eagerly, though he noticed Samuel's frown as they left the house together. The night was clear and cool, the moon casting silver light over the landscape. They walked in silence at first, the sounds of crickets and frogs creating a gentle symphony around them. "Your brothers seem to have accepted me better than I expected," Zach commented as they reached the small pond, its surface reflecting the moon and stars like a perfect mirror. Temperance nodded, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "They're good men, fair-minded, and they love Ellie. They want what's best for her." "And what about you, Temperance? What do you want?" She turned to face him, her expression serious in the moonlight. "I want Ellie to be happy, to know her father, to have the family I couldn't give her these past years." "And for yourself?" Zach pressed gently. Temperance looked away, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "I've learned not to want too much for myself. It leads to disappointment." "That's not the Temperance I knew," Zach said softly. "The girl I loved had dreams bigger than the Texas sky." A sad smile touched her lips. "That girl grew up, Zach. Learned some hard lessons about life." Impulsively, Zach reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "Tell me about these years, what I've missed, how you came to be here, in this place." Temperance sighed, but began to speak, her voice soft in the night air. "When we left Texas, I was nearly 6 months along. Pa had heard about land available in Colorado Territory from a cousin who'd settled here. We traveled by wagon, which was difficult in my condition. Reached this valley just before winter set in." "You must have been terrified," Zach said, trying to imagine her pregnant and far from home. "I was, especially when the snows came and we were still living in a half-built cabin. Ellie arrived during the first big blizzard of the year, December 12th in 1873. Ma delivered her with just my help. The men couldn't even get back from the barn, the snow was so thick." Zach's heart clenched at the thought of Temperance going through childbirth in such conditions, without proper help, without him beside her. "I should have been there," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Temperance agreed simply. "You should have been. But you're here now." "Tell me more," he urged. "What happened after Ellie was born?" "That first winter was the hardest. We nearly ran out of food before spring. But we survived, started planting, building. Each year got a little easier." Her voice softened. "Ellie thrived despite everything. Such a strong, happy child from the very beginning." "She's remarkable," Zach agreed. "You've done an amazing job with her, Temperance." She turned to him, moonlight silvering her hair. "Did you really never stop looking for me? All these years?" "Never," Zach confirmed. "At first, I thought you might have left a message, some clue. I searched our usual meeting places, asked around town. When that yielded nothing, I started wider searches. Whenever I delivered cattle to a new town, I'd ask questions, show your picture." "You kept my picture?" Temperance asked, surprise evident in her voice. "Of course I did. That little tintype we had made at the county fair, I've carried it with me every day since you left." Zach reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small, worn photograph in a simple frame. In the moonlight, Temperance could just make out her younger self, smiling shyly at the camera. "Oh, Zach," she whispered, touching the image gently. "I thought you'd forget me. Move on, find someone else." "There's never been anyone else," he said simply. Not for lack of opportunity, but because no one else was you. Temperance blinked back tears. I've missed you. Every day, watching Ellie grow, seeing your eyes looking back at me, your smile on her face. It was like having pieces of you with me, but never the whole. Zach stepped closer, his hand still holding hers. Temperance, I don't know what the future holds. I have a ranch in Texas, responsibilities there. You have a life here, with your family. But I know I want to be part of Ellie's life, and he hesitated, then continued, his voice low and earnest. And I want a chance to see if what we had, what we felt for each other, is still there. It's complicated now, Temperance said, though she didn't pull away. We're not those young people anymore. No, we're not. We're older. Wiser, maybe. But my feelings for you haven't changed, Temperance. Finding you again, meeting our daughter, it's like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. In the silence that followed, with only the chorus of night creatures and their own breathing between them, Zach slowly leaned forward. He gave her every opportunity to step back, to stop what was happening, but Temperance remained still, her eyes locked with his until the last moment when they fluttered closed. Their lips met softly, tentatively, a gentle press that held 5 years of longing. Temperance's hand came up to rest against his chest, not pushing him away, but feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they parted, both were breathing more quickly, and Temperance's eyes shone with unshed tears. I should have fought harder for you, Zach whispered. Should have come after you the moment I realized you were gone. And I should have found the courage to stand up to my father, Temperance replied, to tell you about the baby. We both made mistakes, Zach. Can we start again? He asked, hope threading through his voice. Not forgetting the past, but moving forward from here? Temperance stepped back slightly, creating a small space between them. I want to, Zach, but we need to think of Ellie first. She doesn't even know you're her father yet, and there's still the question of where you'll live, where we'll live. I know, Zach acknowledged, and I don't expect answers tonight. Just the chance to find them together. Temperance nodded slowly. I think we should tell Ellie the truth tomorrow, after your ride. She deserves to know who you really are. Are you sure she's ready? Zach asked, both eager and anxious at the prospect. She's been asking about her father her whole life, imagining what he's like, where he is. Temperance's lips curved in a small smile. The reality of you is far better than any story I could have told her. Zach's heart swelled with emotion. Thank you. For that, and for giving me this chance with her. With you. They walked back to the farmhouse in companionable silence, their hands occasionally brushing, a new understanding between them. At the porch, Temperance paused. Good night, Zach. I'll see you in the morning. Good night, he replied, resisting the urge to kiss her again. Sweet dreams, Temperance. As he watched her disappear into the house, Zach felt a surge of determination. Somehow, he would find a way to bridge the gap between his life in Texas and this new family he'd discovered. He would not lose them again, not Ellie and not Temperance, if she would have him. Morning dawned bright and clear, perfect for the promised horseback ride. Ellie could barely contain her excitement at breakfast, practically bouncing in her seat as she ate her porridge with record speed. Slow down, Temperance admonished gently. The horse will still be there when you're finished. But I want to go now, Ellie protested, though she did make an effort to eat more carefully. Zach caught Temperance's eye across the table and smiled. This moment of ordinary family life, a mother guiding her daughter, a father looking on with pride, felt precious beyond words. Samuel cleared his throat. I need to ride into town today. Matthew, Luke, you'll continue with the plowing in the south field. Jacob, see to the cattle. Ruth and Temperance have washing to do. It was a clear delineation of the day's tasks, with no role assigned to Zach or acknowledgement of Ellie's planned ride. Temperance opened her mouth, perhaps to object, but Zach spoke first. Mr. Porter, I promised Ellie a ride on my horse this morning. After that, I'd be happy to help wherever I'm needed. Samuel's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Ellie piped up. Please, Grandpa, I did all my lessons yesterday and Mama said I could go. Samuel looked at his granddaughter's pleading face and sighed, his stern expression softening slightly. Very well, but be careful with her. O'Connor, that child is precious to this family. To me as well, sir, Zach replied, his meaning clear to the adults at the table. After breakfast, Zach saddled Rusty while Temperance helped Ellie into a sturdy pair of boots and a warm jacket. The morning air was crisp but promised to warm as the sun climbed higher. Remember what we talked about, Temperance murmured to Zach as they walked toward the barn. After the ride. Zach nodded, nervous anticipation building in his chest. Today, Ellie would learn he was her father. Today, everything would change. Ellie's excitement reached new heights when she saw Rusty, saddled and waiting. He's so big. Will I really get to sit up there? You certainly will, Zach assured her, lifting her into his arms. But you'll be sitting right in front of me, where I can hold you safe, and we'll go nice and slow to start. He set her carefully on the saddle, then mounted behind her, one arm securely around her small waist. Ellie giggled as the horse shifted beneath them, adjusting to their weight. Hold on to the saddle horn like this, Zach instructed, guiding her hands, and remember to sit tall and straight. Temperance watched from the ground, her expression a mixture of pride and anxiety. Stay within sight of the house, she called, and no galloping. We'll be careful, Zach promised, understanding her concern. Just a gentle walk around the pasture. He clicked to Rusty, and the horse moved forward at an easy pace. Ellie squealed with delight, her small body tense with excitement at first, then gradually relaxing as she grew accustomed to the motion. This is wonderful, she declared as they completed their first circuit of the pasture. Can we go a little faster? Maybe just a little, Zach agreed, urging Rusty into a slow trot. He held Ellie securely, showing her how to move with the horse's gait to avoid bouncing uncomfortably. They rode for nearly an hour, Ellie's confidence growing with each circuit. By the time they returned to where Temperance waited, the little girl was beaming with pride and exhilaration. Did you see me, Mama? I was riding a real horse. I saw, Temperance confirmed, smiling up at her daughter. You looked very natural up there, like you were born to ride. Like her father, Zach said softly, meeting Temperance's gaze over Ellie's head. Temperance nodded. Yes, very much like her father. Zach dismounted first, then lifted Ellie down. She immediately ran to her mother, words tumbling out in her excitement as she described every moment of the ride. Temperance listened patiently, then suggested, "Why don't we take some apples down to the pond? We can have a little picnic while Zach gives Rusty a rest." Ellie agreed enthusiastically, and soon the three of them were settled on a blanket by the pond, the same spot where Zach and Temperance had talked the night before. Rusty grazed nearby, enjoying the fresh spring grass. Temperance handed out apples and looked meaningfully at Zach. He nodded, understanding that the moment had come. Ellie, Temperance began carefully, do you remember all the stories I've told you about your father? About the cowboy who had to go away before you were born? Ellie nodded, taking a bite of her apple. You said he was brave and kind, and that he rides horses better than anyone. That's right, Temperance said, her voice gentle. And do you remember how I told you that someday, if we were very lucky, he might find us again? Ellie's chewing slowed, her eyes widening as she looked from her mother to Zach and back again. Is Zach my papa? She asked, her voice small and wondering. Yes, sweetheart, Temperance confirmed, reaching out to smooth her daughter's wild curls. Zach is your father. He didn't know about you until very recently, but as soon as he found out, he came looking for us. Ellie turned to Zach, her expression serious. Are you really my papa? Zach's throat tightened with emotion. I am, Ellie. I'm your father, and I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner, that I missed so much of your life. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. For a long moment, Ellie simply stared at him, processing this momentous information. Then, with the directness of childhood, she asked, If you're my papa, does that mean you're going to live with us now? In our house? Zach glanced at Temperance, unsure how to answer. Well, that's something your mom and I need to figure out. I have a ranch in Texas, you see. It's quite far from here. Texas? Ellie's brow furrowed. Is that where I was before I was born? Mama says we came from somewhere else when I was still in her tummy. That's right, Temperance said. We lived in Texas before. That's where I met your father. Can we go see your ranch? Ellie asked Zach, excitement replacing her solemnity. Do you have lots of horses there? And cows? I do, Zach confirmed, smiling at her enthusiasm. Many horses and hundreds of cattle. And wide open spaces to ride as fast as you want. Ellie turned to her mother. Can we go, Mama? Please? Temperance looked momentarily flustered. Well, that is, we haven't decided anything yet, Ellie. Your grandparents and uncles are here, and our farm. But my papa is in Texas, Ellie said with the simple logic of childhood, and I want to be where my papa is. Zach's heart swelled at the easy acceptance in his daughter's voice, but he was careful not to press the advantage. There's no rush to decide anything, Ellie. I'm staying here for a while, getting to know you. And your mama and I will talk about what happens next. Ellie seemed satisfied with this answer. Then, with the abrupt subject changes typical of 4-year-olds, she asked, Can I feed an apple to Rusty? Of course, Zach said, grateful for the momentary reprieve from difficult questions. He showed her how to hold her hand flat with the apple in her palm, and Rusty gently took the offering, making Ellie giggle with delight. While their daughter was occupied with the horse, Temperance leaned closer to Zach. She's taking it well, she whispered, better than I expected. Children are resilient, Zach replied. And we've given her good news, not bad. A father who wants her, who came looking for her. But Texas, Zach, I haven't even considered leaving Colorado. He took her hand, squeezing it gently. I know, and I'm not asking you to decide anything today. We have time. Temperance nodded, but her expression remained troubled. My family is here. Everything Ellie has known is here. And her father's in Texas, Zach said quietly. Along with the legacy that should be hers someday, land, a home, a future. Before Temperance could respond, Ellie ran back to them, her face alight with joy. Rusty likes me. He took the apple so gently, just like you showed me. Of course he likes you, Zach said, pulling her into a hug without thinking. How could he not? You're perfect. To his surprise and delight, Ellie returned the hug fiercely, her small arms wrapped around his neck. I'm glad you're my papa, she whispered. I've been waiting for you forever. Zach's eyes met Temperance's over their daughter's shoulder, and he saw tears shimmering there, tears that matched the ones he felt building in his own eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever decisions needed to be made, this moment was perfect. His daughter in his arms, the woman he loved beside him, and a future full of possibilities stretching before them. I'm glad too, Ellie, he whispered back, and I promise you, the wait is over. I'm here now. The news that Zachary O'Connor was Ellie's father spread quickly through the Porter household. By supper time, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Ruth was more subdued, watching Zach and Ellie with wary eyes as the little girl peppered her newly discovered father with endless questions. Samuel's expression had hardened into stone, his disapproval radiating across the table. Only the brothers seemed relatively unchanged, though Luke made a point of sitting beside Zach. As if offering silent support, Ellie, oblivious to the undercurrents, was in her element. Will you teach me to ride better, Papa, so I can go fast like you? And can I see your ranch soon? How many horses do you have there? Ellie, Temperance gently interrupted, let your father eat his supper. There will be plenty of time for questions later. But I have so many questions, Ellie protested. I've never had a papa before. A tense silence fell over the table. Samuel set down his fork with deliberate precision. Perhaps this conversation would be better continued after the meal. In private, Zach nodded, understanding the older man's discomfort. Of course, sir. The rest of the meal passed in awkward silence, broken only by Ellie's occasional whispered questions to Zach, which he answered in equally hushed tones. When the dishes were cleared, Samuel stood. O'Connor, a word in private, if you please. Zach glanced at Temperance, who nodded slightly, her expression concerned but resigned. He followed Samuel out onto the porch, where the older man lit his pipe and stared out at the darkening landscape for a long moment before speaking. "You've turned my granddaughter's head with talk of Texas and horses," Samuel said finally. "But I want to be clear about something. That child has a home here, a stable life, family who love her." "I understand that, sir," Zach replied, keeping his voice level. "And I respect what you and your family have done for Ellie, for Temperance, too." "Do you?" Samuel turned to face him, his expression hard. "Then you'll understand why I can't allow you to disrupt that stability, to fill her head with dreams of Texas, only to disappoint her when you eventually return to your life there." Zach felt a flare of anger, but controlled it carefully. "With all due respect, Mr. Porter, I have no intention of disappointing my daughter, or of being separated from her again." "And what does that mean exactly? You planning to settle here in Colorado? Leave your ranch behind?" "I don't know yet," Zach admitted. "That's something Temperance and I need to decide together. But one way or another, I will be part of Ellie's life from now on." Samuel puffed on his pipe, the smoke curling around them in the evening air. "And if Temperance chooses to stay here, with her family, what then?" "Then I'll find a way to make it work. Buy land nearby, perhaps. Visit as often as possible until I can arrange something more permanent." "And if she chooses to go with you?" "To take my granddaughter away to Texas?" Zach met the older man's gaze steadily. "That would be her choice, sir. Not mine to force, not yours to prevent." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "You still love her? My daughter?" It wasn't a question, but Zach answered anyway. "Yes, sir, I do. I never stopped." "Even after she left you without a word, let you believe she'd abandoned you?" "I was angry at first," Zach acknowledged, "hurt, confused. But once I learned the circumstances, that she was pressured to leave," he shook his head. "I can't blame her for choosing her family's security over an uncertain future with me." Samuel studied him for a long moment, then tapped his pipe against the porch railing, emptying the bowl. "You're not what I expected, O'Connor." "What did you expect, sir?" "A hothead like your father, a man looking for revenge or to claim what he sees as his property." Zach's jaw tightened. "Ellie isn't property. She's my daughter. And Temperance isn't either. She's the woman I love, the mother of my child. I want what's best for both of them." "And you think you know what that is better than her own family?" "I think Temperance is old enough to decide for herself," Zach replied evenly. "And I think Ellie deserves to know her father. Beyond that, I'm willing to listen and compromise." Samuel was silent for so long that Zach thought the conversation might be over. Then, unexpectedly, the older man chuckled a dry, humorless sound. "You really are different from your father." "I'd like to think so, sir. He was a proud man, quick to anger, didn't know the meaning of compromise." "I remember," Zach said quietly. "I also remember how I swore I'd never be like him after what happened with your son." Samuel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Thomas was proud too, headstrong. Wouldn't listen when I told him gambling would be his downfall. "I'm sorry for what happened to him, sir, truly." Samuel nodded once, sharply. "What's done is done. Can't change the past." He turned to go back inside, then paused. "But the future, that's still being written." He fixed Zach with a penetrating stare. "Just remember this, boy. If you hurt my daughter or my granddaughter, there won't be a place far enough for you to run." "I understand, sir. And I give you my word, hurting them is the last thing I want." With a final assessing look, Samuel went back into the house, leaving Zach alone on the porch with his thoughts. The conversation had gone better than he'd expected, not warm by any means, but not openly hostile either. A truce of sorts. The door opened again, and Temperance stepped out, her expression questioning. "Everything all right?" Pa looked almost thoughtful when he came inside. "We had a good talk," Zach said, reaching for her hand. "He's concerned about you and Ellie, which is natural. But I think he might be starting to accept that I'm not going anywhere." Temperance squeezed his fingers. That's progress, at least. Ellie's asking for you. She wants her papa to tell her a bedtime story. Zach's heart lifted at the words. I'd like nothing better. Together, they went inside to tuck their daughter into bed. Over the next week, a routine began to develop. Zach found lodging in the nearby town of Pine Creek, but spent his days at the Porter farm, helping with the spring planting and spending every possible moment with Ellie. In the evenings, he would join the family for supper, tell Ellie a bedtime story, and then often walk with Temperance in the moonlight, talking about the future, rebuilding the connection that had been severed 5 years before. Gradually, the Porters began to accept his presence. Ruth thawed enough to ask about his ranch in Texas and seemed grudgingly impressed by his descriptions of the operation he'd built. The brothers treated him with increasing camaraderie, including him in their work and conversations, as if he were already part of the family. Even Samuel had progressed to brief civil exchanges, though he remained reserved. Ellie blossomed under her father's attention, following him around the farm whenever Temperance would allow it, soaking up his stories and begging for daily rides on Rusty. Her easy acceptance of Zach as her father touched everyone who saw them together. One evening, as Zach and Temperance walked by the pond that had become their special place, he broached the subject they'd been circling for days. I need to return to Texas soon, he said, feeling her tense beside him. Only temporarily, he added quickly. The spring cattle drive is coming up, and I need to be there to oversee it, but I'll come back as soon as it's done. How long will you be gone? Temperance asked, her voice carefully controlled. A month, maybe 6 weeks at most. Zach turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. But I have a proposal before I go. Temperance's eyes widened. Zach, not that kind of proposal. Not yet, anyway, he said with a small smile. Though I hope we'll get there eventually. No, what I want to propose is that you and Ellie come to Texas when I return. Visit the ranch, see the life I could offer you there. Leave Colorado? Temperance's brow furrowed. My family would never agree. They wouldn't have to come, at least not right away. Just you and Ellie to visit. To see if you could be happy there. Zach squeezed her hands gently. I'm not asking you to decide anything permanent yet. Just to consider all the possibilities. Temperance was quiet for a long moment, considering. It would be good for Ellie to see where she comes from, where her father lives. And for you to see it too, Zach added, to know that I can provide for you both, give you a good life. I never doubted that, Zach. Then will you come, when I return from the cattle drive? Temperance looked up at him, her green eyes reflecting the moonlight. Yes, we'll come, but just to visit, to see. I'm not making any promises beyond that. It was enough for now. Zach pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Thank you. That's all I ask, a chance to show you what our life could be. Temperance rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. When will you tell Ellie you're leaving? Tomorrow, Zach said, his voice tight with regret. I've been dreading it. She's going to be so disappointed. She'll understand that you're coming back, Temperance assured him, especially if she knows we'll be going to see your ranch afterward. That will give her something to look forward to. I hope so. Zach pressed a kiss to the top of Temperance's head, inhaling the scent of her hair. I've only just found her. Leaving even temporarily feels wrong. You'll write to her? Send letters she can keep? Every day, Zach promised, and to you as well, if you'd like. Temperance tilted her face up to his. I would like that very much. The kiss they shared beneath the stars was filled with promise, not just of passion, but of a future together, of possibilities yet to be explored. When they finally parted, Temperance's cheeks were flushed, and Zach's breathing was unsteady. I should go back to town, he said reluctantly. It's getting late. Stay, Temperance said impulsively. Not in that way. But the barn is comfortable enough, and if you're leaving soon, Ellie will want every moment with you she can get. Zach smiled, touching her cheek gently. I'd like that. To be here in the morning when she wakes. As they walked back to the farmhouse, hand in hand, Zach felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. The separation ahead would be difficult, but necessary. And when he returned, they would take the next step toward building their future together, whatever and wherever that future might be. Ellie took the news of Zach's impending departure better than expected, primarily because of the promised visit to Texas afterward. "I'll keep Rusty company while you're gone," she declared solemnly, "and practice my riding so I can ride all your horses when we come to visit." "That sounds like a fine plan," Zach agreed, relief evident in his voice. "And I'll write to you every day, telling you about the cattle drive and all the preparations for your visit." "Promise?" Ellie asked, her blue eyes, his eyes serious. "Cross my heart," Zach vowed, making the gesture over his chest. The week before his departure passed in a flurry of activity. Zach spent every possible moment with Ellie, teaching her more about horses, telling her stories of Texas, building memories to sustain them both during the separation ahead. In the evenings, after Ellie was asleep, he and Temperance would talk late into the night, planning the visit to come, but also simply reconnecting, rediscovering each other after 5 years apart. The night before he was to leave, after Ellie had been tucked in with extra stories and extra hugs, Zach found himself alone with Temperance on the porch swing. The spring night was mild, scented with blooming flowers and rich earth. Inside, the rest of the family had retired early, giving them privacy for their farewell. "I have something for you," Zach said, reaching into his pocket. "For both you and Ellie, actually." He withdrew a small velvet pouch and emptied its contents into Temperance's palm. 2 identical gold lockets, each on a delicate chain. "They're beautiful," Temperance breathed, opening one to find a tiny photograph of Zach inside. "I had them made in town yesterday. The photographer took my picture specially for them." Zach closed her fingers around the lockets. "So you and Ellie can keep me close while I'm away." Tears welled in Temperance's eyes. "Thank you. It's a perfect gift." "There's something else I want to give you before I go," Zach said, his voice dropping lower. "Something I should have given you 5 years ago." From his other pocket he produced a small ring, a simple gold band with a modest diamond that caught the lamplight from the window behind them. "Zach!" Temperance gasped, her free hand flying to her mouth. "I'm not asking, not yet," he said quickly. "I know we still have things to figure out, but I want you to know my intentions, Temperance. I want you to be my wife. I want us to be a real family, you, me, and Ellie. And I hope that after you visit Texas, after you see what I can offer you there, you'll consider accepting this properly." Temperance stared at the ring, emotions warring across her face. "You've had this all along?" "Since before you left," Zach admitted. "I was going to propose the night we were supposed to meet by the old oak. Had it all planned out, speech memorized, ring polished to a shine, but you never came, and I kept it. Couldn't bring myself to sell it, even in the leanest times." "Oh, Zach," tears spilled onto Temperance's cheeks. "If I had known—" "You know now," he said gently, "and I'm still here, still waiting. The only difference is, now we have Ellie too." Temperance wiped away her tears and squared her shoulders. "Ask me again when you return, after we've visited Texas, after we've had time to see if we can build a life together after all this time apart. Ask me then, and you'll have my answer." Zach nodded, tucking the ring back into his pocket. "I can wait a little longer. I've waited 5 years already." He pulled her into his arms, and this time their kiss was deeper. More urgent a promise of what was to come, a taste of the passion they'd once shared and might share again. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I should go," Zach said reluctantly. "Early start tomorrow." "I know." Temperance straightened his collar, a small domestic gesture that made his heart ache with longing for what might have been what still could be. "Be safe on your journey. Come back to us." "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Zach promised. 6 weeks, that's all. And then I'll be back for you and Ellie." With a final kiss, he tore himself away, knowing that if he stayed any longer, leaving would become impossible. As he rode back to town beneath the star-strewn sky, Zach's heart was lighter than it had been in years, despite the separation ahead. He had found his daughter. He had found Temperance again. and soon, he hoped, they would build a future together, a future he had once thought lost forever. The day of Zach's departure dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself was mocking the heaviness in Temperance's heart. She rose early, dressing with unusual care, and helped Ellie into her best dress. "We want Papa to remember how pretty we are while he's away," she explained as she braided her daughter's dark curls. "I'm going to miss him so much," Ellie said, her lower lip trembling slightly. "Even though it's only until the big hand on the clock goes all the way around 6 times. Temperance smiled at Ellie's understanding of the 6-week separation. "That's right. And he'll write to us, remember? Letters just for you that I can read to you." This brightened Ellie's mood, and she chattered happily about what she would tell her father in her return letters as Temperance finished her hair. The family gathered for an early breakfast, and Temperance was touched to see that even her father made an effort to be civil to Zach, wishing him safe travels and a successful cattle drive. Her brothers were more openly friendly, offering advice about the trail conditions based on reports they'd heard from travelers. After breakfast, Zach saddled Rusty and packed his saddlebags with provisions for the journey to Texas. The whole family gathered in the yard to see him off, but it was Ellie who commanded his attention, running to him with her arms outstretched. "Don't forget your promise, Papa," she cried as he swung her up into his arms. "Write to me every day." "I won't forget," Zach assured her, holding her close. "And you remember your promise, too. Practice your writing so you're ready for Texas." "I will." Ellie wrapped her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. "I love you, Papa." The simple declaration brought tears to Zach's eyes. "I love you too, Ellie, more than you can possibly know." He set her down gently and turned to Temperance, who stood nearby, struggling to maintain her composure. 6 weeks, he said softly, taking her hands in his. "It will pass before you know it. Be careful," she whispered. "Come back to us. Nothing could stop me." Zach leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips, heedless of the watching family. When he pulled back, Temperance's cheeks were flushed, but her eyes were determined. "We'll be ready when you return," she promised, "for our journey to Texas." With final farewells to the rest of the Porters, Zach mounted Rusty and tipped his hat to the family assembled before him. "Thank you all for your hospitality, for giving me the chance to know my daughter. I'll be back before you know it." As he rode away, Ellie waved frantically, calling goodbye until he was a distant speck on the horizon. Only then did she turn to Temperance, her small face serious. "He will come back, won't he, Mama?" "Yes, darling," Temperance assured her, kneeling to her level. "Your father is a man of his word. He'll come back for us, just as he promised." Standing nearby, Samuel Porter cleared his throat. "Well, that's that. Time to get back to work. There's planting to be done." As the family dispersed to their various tasks, Temperance lifted Ellie into her arms and walked back toward the house. "Let's put on your locket, shall we? So you can keep Papa close to your heart while he's away." The gold locket, with Zach's photograph inside, became Ellie's most treasured possession over the following weeks. She insisted on wearing it every day, often opening it to look at her father's face, especially when a new letter arrived. True to his word, Zach wrote frequently simple letters addressed specifically to Ellie, describing his journey, the preparations for the cattle drive, the animals on his ranch, and how much he missed his little cowgirl. Temperance wore her matching locket beneath her dress close to her heart and received her own letters from Zach, longer, more personal missives that spoke of his feelings for her, his hopes for their future, and his plans for their visit to Texas. With each letter, she found herself increasingly drawn to the idea of a life with him there, though she was careful not to commit herself in her replies. The Porter family, observing the joy Zach's letters brought to both Temperance and Ellie, gradually began to accept the inevitable that Zach O'Connor was now a permanent part of their lives in one form or another. Even Samuel softened, occasionally asking about the cattle drive or expressing interest in Zach's ranching methods. "He seems to be doing well for himself," he commented one evening after Temperance had shared parts of Zach's latest letter. 5,000 acres is nothing to sneeze at." "He's worked hard for it," Temperance replied, pleased by her father's grudging respect. built it from nothing by his own efforts. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. Different from his father in that respect, Patrick O'Connor never met a shortcut he didn't like. It was the closest thing to approval Temperance had heard from her father regarding Zach, and she treasured it, sensing a shifting in the family dynamics that had once seemed so immovable. As the weeks passed and spring deepened into early summer, preparations for the visit to Texas began in earnest. Temperance sewed new dresses for herself and Ellie, practical but pretty garments suitable for travel and for making a good impression at Zach's ranch. Ruth, warming to the idea despite her initial reservations, contributed a beautiful shawl she had been saving for a special occasion. "Texas evenings can be cool, even in summer," she said as she presented it to her daughter, "and you should look your best when you meet his neighbors." The gesture brought tears to Temperance's eyes. "Thank you, Ma." "For understanding," Ruth patted her cheek affectionately. "I just want you to be happy, child, and that little girl of yours deserves a father. If Zachary O'Connor is the man who can provide both those things, well, even your pa and I can't argue with that." As the 6-week mark approached, excitement built within the Porter household. Ellie counted down the days with increasing anticipation, often sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the road for the first glimpse of her father returning. Then, 5 days before Zach was due to arrive, a rider appeared, not Zach, but a stranger on a lathered horse, bearing a telegram from Texas. Temperance's heart froze as the man handed her the yellow paper, fear clutching at her throat. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the telegram and read the brief message. "Cattle drive, delayed, stop river, flooding stop, all safe but return, postponed 2 weeks, stop letter follows, stop missing you both, stop Zachary." Relief washed through Temperance, followed by disappointment. 2 more weeks of waiting seemed an eternity, especially to explain to Ellie, who had been counting the days with such precision. That evening, as she tucked her daughter into bed, Temperance broke the news as gently as she could. "Papa's work is taking a little longer than he expected, darling. The river is too high to cross with the cattle, so they have to wait for it to go down." Ellie's face crumpled in disappointment. "But he promised to come back when the big hand went around 6 times. "And he will come back," Temperance assured her. "It will just take a little longer. 2 more weeks. That's not so very long, is it?" "It's forever," Ellie said, tears welling in her blue eyes. "What if he forgets about us?" Temperance gathered her daughter close. "Your father could never forget us, Ellie. Never. He loves us too much. And look." She pointed to the locket around Ellie's neck. "You carry him with you every day, just as he carries thoughts of you with him." Gradually, Ellie's tears subsided, replaced by reluctant acceptance. 2 more weeks, she sighed. "I suppose I can wait that long if I have to." Temperance kissed her forehead. "That's my brave girl. And just think, it gives us more time to prepare for our trip to Texas, more time to sew pretty dresses and practice our riding." This cheered Ellie somewhat, and she drifted off to sleep clutching her locket, dreaming of the father who would return to them, however delayed his journey might be. The following days brought Zach's promised letter, explaining in more detail the circumstances of the delay. Heavy spring rains had swollen the rivers along the cattle drive route, making crossings dangerous. They were camped on the north bank of the Brazos, waiting for the waters to recede enough for safe passage. He expressed his profound disappointment at the delay, but assured Temperance and Ellie of his unwavering determination to return to them as soon as humanly possible. And so, the Porter family settled in for 2 more weeks of waiting, the rhythm of farm life continuing as spring ripened into full summer. Temperance threw herself into preparations for the journey to Texas, trying to keep both her own spirits and Ellie's high despite the disappointment of the delay. 12 days into their extended wait, just as hope was beginning to rise again with the approaching new reunion date, another rider appeared on the horizon. This time, Temperance recognized the silhouette immediately, the broad shoulders, the easy seat in the saddle, the chestnut horse moving at a steady lope. "Papi!" Ellie shrieked from where she had been playing in the yard. "Mama, Papa's home!" Temperance's heart leapt as she hurried out of the house, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. It was indeed Zach, 2 days earlier than his revised estimate, riding toward them with evident purpose. Ellie was already running down the lane, her dark curls flying behind her, shouting her father's name with unbridled joy. Zach spotted her, urged Rusty to a faster pace, and within moments had swung down from the saddle, catching his daughter up in his arms as she flung herself at him. "You came back!" Ellie cried, covering his face with kisses. "You really came back." "Of course I did, little one," Zach laughed, hugging her tightly. "I promised, didn't I?" And O'Connor always keeps his promises. He carried Ellie up the lane to where Temperance waited, her heart in her eyes. Setting his daughter down gently, he stepped forward, drinking in the sight of the woman he loved. "Temperance," he said softly, "I've missed you something fierce." "And I you," she replied, propriety forgotten as she stepped into his embrace. Their kiss, witnessed by an approving Ellie and the gradually assembling Porter family, was a homecoming in itself, a promise kept, a future beckoning. When they finally parted, both were smiling despite the tears that threatened. "The Rivers?" Temperance asked, remembering his letter. "Went down faster than expected," Zach explained, "and I pushed hard on the ride back, changed horses at every stop. Couldn't bear to be away from you two a moment longer than necessary." "I'm glad," Temperance said simply, linking her arm through his as Ellie danced around them, unable to contain her excitement. "Are we going to Texas now, Papa? Can we leave tomorrow? I've been practicing my riding, just like I promised." Zach laughed, lifting her up again. "Not quite so fast, cowgirl. I need a day or two to rest, and your mama needs time to finish your preparations. But yes, we'll be heading to Texas very soon." Samuel stepped forward, extending his hand to Zach in a gesture that surprised everyone present. "Welcome back, O'Connor. Successful drive, I take it?" "Very, sir," Zach replied, shaking the offered hand firmly. "Got top dollar for the herd in Fort Worth." "Good, good," Samuel nodded, then added gruffly, "You'll stay here this time, I assume? No need for you to ride back and forth from town." The invitation, unexpected and significant, brought a warm smile to Zach's face. "Thank you, sir. I'd appreciate that." "The barn's comfortable enough," Samuel continued, unwilling to extend the olive branch too far. "Ruth will have supper ready in an hour. You look like you could use a good meal." With that, he turned and walked back to the house, but not before Temperance caught the hint of a smile on her father's weathered face. "He's coming around," she murmured to Zach as they followed, Ellie skipping ahead to tell her grandmother the exciting news of her father's return. "Wonders never cease," Zach replied, squeezing her hand, "though I suspect it has more to do with you and Ellie than any fondness for me." "Give it time," Temperance advised. "My father is stubborn, but he's not unreasonable. He can see how happy you make us." That evening, as the reunited family gathered around the supper table, there was a lightness in the air that had been missing before. Zach regaled them with tales of the cattle drive, careful to edit the more dangerous aspects for Ellie's ears, and shared news from Texas that even Samuel found interesting. After Ellie had been tucked into bed, with extra stories to make up for the weeks apart, Zach and Temperance walked to their pond, the stars bright overhead and the summer air heavy with the scent of wildflowers. "I have something to ask you," Zach said when they reached the familiar spot. "Something I've been thinking about throughout the long journey home." Temperance turned to face him, her heart quickening. "What is it?" "I know we agreed that you and Ellie would visit Texas, see if you could be happy there." Zach took her hands in his expression earnest in the moonlight. "But I've been thinking, perhaps we should consider another option as well." "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I sold the ranch in Texas, bought land here in Colorado instead, built something new for all of us?" Temperance's eyes widened in surprise. "Sell the double bar? But Zach, you've worked so hard for it. It's your dream." "You and Ellie are my dream," he corrected gently. "The ranch is just land and cattle. Important, yes, but not irreplaceable. You are." "I can't ask you to give up everything you've built," Temperance protested, though the idea of not having to leave her family and everything familiar tugged at her heart. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Zach squeezed her hands. I've spent the past 6 weeks thinking about what matters most, and the truth is, Temperance, I would rather build something new with you than hold on to something old without you." Tears sprang to Temperance's eyes at the sincerity in his voice. "Oh, Zach." "That said," he continued with a small smile, "I still want you and Ellie to see Texas, to know the land that could be ours if you fall in love with it. I want you to make an informed choice, Texas or Colorado, or somewhere else entirely if that's what you want. The only non-negotiable for me is that we're together, you, me, and our daughter." Temperance's heart swelled with love for this man who had searched for 5 years to find her, who had forgiven her for keeping his child from him, who was now willing to give up everything he'd built to make her happy. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would like very much to see your Texas ranch. To truly consider all our options before we decide." She stepped closer, resting her hands on his chest. "But Zach, know this wherever we end up, as long as we're together, I'll be happy." The kiss they shared beneath the summer stars sealed that promise, a commitment to find their way forward together, to build a life that honored both their pasts and their shared future. 2 days later, after tearful goodbyes with the Porter family and promises to write regularly, Temperance and Ellie set off with Zach for Texas. They traveled by wagon, taking a leisurely pace to make the journey as comfortable as possible for Ellie, who had never ventured far from the Colorado farm before. The trip became an adventure in itself, with stops in small towns along the way, nights spent camping under the stars, and days filled with Ellie's excited discoveries of the changing landscape. Zach proved to be a patient, attentive father, answering Ellie's endless questions and teaching her about the plants and animals they encountered. Temperance watched their growing bond with a full heart, seeing in their interactions all that had been missing from Ellie's life and from her own. Each evening, after Ellie had fallen asleep in the wagon, Temperance and Zach would sit by the campfire, talking long into the night, rebuilding the connection that had been severed 5 years before. "I keep thinking about what might have been," Temperance admitted one night as they crossed into Texas. "If I'd been stronger, stood up to my father, told you about the baby." "Don't," Zach said gently, taking her hand. "We can't change the past, Temperance. We can only move forward from here." "But Ellie lost so much time with you. You lost so much of her life. And we have the rest of our lives to make up for it," Zach reminded her. "Besides, your father was right about one thing. I wasn't ready to be a father at 20. The man I was then and the man I am now are very different." "How so?" Temperance asked, curious about how he viewed his own transformation. Zach considered the question thoughtfully. "I was still finding my way then. Had ambition but not much direction. These 5 years, they've taught me patience, determination, what it means to work for something beyond myself." He looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "Losing you made me grow up, Temperance. Made me become the kind of man who could be worthy of you when I found you again." Temperance's breath caught at the simple honesty in his words. "You were always worthy, Zach. Always." Their lips met across the dying fire, a kiss that spoke of forgiveness for the past and hope for the future. 3 weeks after leaving Colorado, they crested a hill, and Zach pointed ahead with evident pride. "There it is, the Double Bar Ranch." Temperance and Ellie leaned forward eagerly, taking in the vista spread before them, a sprawling ranch house nestled in a valley, surrounded by outbuildings, corrals, and beyond, vast pastures stretching to the horizon, dotted with cattle. A small creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods that provided welcome shade in the Texas heat. "It's beautiful," Temperance breathed, genuinely impressed by the scope of what Zach had built. "It's so big," Ellie exclaimed. "And look at all the horses, Mama." Indeed, a herd of horses grazed in a pasture near the house, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. As they approached, figures emerged from the ranch house ranch hands, coming to greet their returning boss. "Welcome home, Zach," called a gray-haired man, stepping forward as they pulled up in front of the house. "And this must be the family you've been telling us about." "Hank, Zach greeted him warmly, jumping down from the wagon. "I'd like you to meet Temperance Porter and our daughter Eleanor. Ladies, this is Hank Durbin, the best foreman in Texas and the man who's kept this place running while I've been away." Hank tipped his hat respectfully. "Madam, little miss, it's a pleasure to finally meet you both. Zach here hasn't talked about anything else since he got back from the cattle drive." Temperance smiled, liking the older man's straightforward manner. "The pleasure is ours. Mr. Durbin, Zach has told us how invaluable you are to the ranch." Ellie, overcome with shyness at meeting a stranger, pressed against Temperance's skirts but managed a small wave. "Come inside," Zach invited, lifting Ellie into his arms. "Mrs. Garcia will have supper waiting, and I'm sure you're both ready to rest after our journey." The ranch house proved to be as impressive inside as out, spacious and well-appointed, with good furniture and signs of prosperity everywhere. A plump, middle-aged Mexican woman greeted them warmly, immediately taking Ellie under her wing and promising her freshly baked cookies after she'd had a chance to wash up. "Mrs. Garcia has been keeping house for me since I bought into the ranch," Zach explained as he showed Temperance to the room that would be hers during their stay. "She and her husband Juan live in the cottage behind the main house. He's our cook for the hands and helps with the horses." "They seem lovely," Temperance said, taking in the comfortable bedroom with its large bed and cheerful quilt. "Everyone does. You've built quite a community here, Zach." He shrugged modestly. "It's a good place with good people. Old man Barton had a knack for hiring the right sort, and I've been fortunate enough to keep most of them on." He hesitated, then added, "I want you to consider this your home, Temperance, yours and Ellie's, for as long as you're here, and hopefully, forever." The following weeks were a revelation for Temperance and Ellie. Zach showed them every aspect of ranch life, from the daily routines of caring for livestock to the business side of cattle ranching. Ellie blossomed in the wide open spaces, learning to ride a gentle mare Zach chose especially for her, helping to collect eggs from the chicken coop, and following Mrs. Garcia around the kitchen, eager to learn how to make the tortillas and sweet treats the older woman specialized in. Temperance found herself increasingly drawn to the rhythm of life on the double bar. There was a freedom here that she hadn't experienced on her family's farm in Colorado, more space, more possibilities. And watching Zach in his element, confident and capable as he managed his land and his people, she fell in love with him all over again. One evening, a month into their visit, Zach asked Temperance to ride with him to his favorite spot on the property, a high bluff overlooking the ranch, where the sunset painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Ellie had been left in Mrs. Garcia's capable hands, happily helping to prepare dinner and practice her Spanish. As they reached the summit and dismounted, Zach spread a blanket on the ground and invited Temperance to sit beside him. For a long moment, they simply admired the view in companionable silence. "What do you think of the double bar?" Zach finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Could you see yourself being happy here?" Temperance considered the question seriously. "It's a wonderful place, Zach, more than I ever imagined. Ellie loves it here. I've never seen her so excited, so full of life." "And you?" Zach pressed gently. "Could you make a life here, so far from your family?" "I miss them," Temperance admitted, "especially my brothers," but she turned to face him, her decision made. "Yes, Zach, I could be happy here. We could be happy here, you, me, and Ellie, together." The joy that spread across Zach's face was worth any sacrifice. "Do you mean it? Truly?" "I do." Temperance reached for his hand. "This past month has shown me what our life could be like. The ranch is beautiful, the people are kind, and most importantly, you're here. This is where you belong, Zach, and where you belong, we belong too." Zach's eyes shone with emotion. "I want you to be certain, Temperance. I meant what I said. I'm willing to sell the ranch, move to Colorado, if that's what would make you happiest." "I know you are," Temperance said softly, "and that's one of the reasons I love you so much. But this is your dream, Zach. The ranch you've built from nothing. I won't ask you to give that up when we can be just as happy here." "You love me?" Zach repeated, focusing on the words she'd let slip so naturally. Temperance smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "Of course I do. I never stopped. Even when we were apart. and these weeks together have only deepened those feelings. With deliberate movements, Zach reached into his pocket and withdrew the small ring box he'd shown her the night before he left Colorado. "Then perhaps it's time I asked you properly," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Temperance Porter, will you marry me? Be my wife, raise our daughter together, and perhaps give her brothers and sisters to grow up with on this land?" Tears of joy filled Temperance's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Zachary O'Connor. Yes, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the same ring he'd intended to give her 5 years before Zach pulled her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and commitment. When they returned to the ranch house, hand in hand and glowing with happiness, they found Ellie waiting anxiously on the porch, having been let in on the secret by a conspiratorial Zach earlier that day. "Did Mama say yes?" she demanded as soon as they dismounted. "Are we staying here forever? Are you going to be my real papa now?" Zach laughed, swinging her up into his arms. "Yes to all of those questions, little one. Your mama has agreed to marry me, and we're going to be a real family, right here on the double bar." Ellie's squeal of delight brought smiles to the faces of the ranch hands who had gathered discreetly nearby, hoping for good news. Hank stepped forward, offering his congratulations, followed by Mrs. Garcia, who immediately began planning a celebration feast for the following day. That night, after Ellie had finally been persuaded to go to sleep, her excitement having kept her chattering long past her usual bedtime, Zach and Temperance sat on the porch swing, discussing their future. "We should write to your family tomorrow," Zach said, his arm around Temperance's shoulders. "Invite them to the wedding. It's important to me that they be here if they're willing." "They will be," Temperance assured him. "Even Pa. He's coming around, Zach, and seeing this place, understanding what you've built it, will help him accept that this is the right decision for us." "When shall we have the wedding?" Zach asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'd marry you tomorrow if we could arrange it that quickly." Temperance laughed. "Let's give my family time to travel from Colorado, perhaps a month from now. That will give us time to prepare properly, and for Ellie to get used to the idea of a wedding." "A month seems like an eternity," Zach grumbled good-naturedly. "But I suppose I can wait since I've waited 5 years already." "Just think of it as our last month of courtship," Temperance suggested, her eyes twinkling. "A chance to do things properly this time." "I like the sound of that," Zach agreed, pulling her closer. "And after the wedding, we'll have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." The month leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparations and anticipation. The Porters arrived 2 weeks before the ceremony, giving them time to see the ranch and get to know the community that would be Temperance and Ellie's new home. Samuel Porter, true to Temperance's prediction, was visibly impressed by the double bar and grudgingly appreciative of what Zach had accomplished. Ruth quickly formed a bond with Mrs. Garcia, the two women collaborating on wedding preparations with growing enthusiasm. The Porter brothers explored the ranch with interest, asking knowledgeable questions and forming friendships with the hands. Most importantly, they all witnessed the happiness of Temperance, Zach, and Ellie, together the natural way they had formed a family unit, the love that was evident in every interaction. Even Samuel could not deny the rightness of the match in the face of such clear joy. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a Texas sky so blue it matched Zach and Ellie's eyes. The ceremony was held under the cottonwoods by the creek, with Ellie serving as flower girl, scattering petals with solemn concentration as she preceded her mother down the makeshift aisle. Temperance, radiant in a simple white dress trimmed with lace, walked on her father's arm, her eyes fixed on Zach, who waited for her beneath an arch of wildflowers. The local preacher officiated, his words simple but heartfelt, as he united the couple in marriage. "What God has brought together after long separation," he declared, "let no man put asunder." The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with a feast prepared by Mrs. Garcia and Ruth, dancing to fiddle music provided by one of the hands, and toasts to the health and happiness of the newly formed family. Even Samuel offered his blessing, his voice gruff with emotion, as he welcomed Zach officially into the Porter family. When the last guest had departed and Ellie had been tucked into bed, Zach led his new wife to the master bedroom, their bedroom now, where he had arranged a private celebration of their own. Candles lit the room, and wildflowers filled vases on every surface, their sweet scent perfuming the air. "Welcome home, Mrs. O'Connor," Zach said softly, closing the door behind them. Temperance turned to him, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had searched so long to find her, who had forgiven so much, who had given her and Ellie a home and a future filled with promise. "I am home," she whispered, stepping into his embrace. "Wherever you are, that's home to me." Their kiss sealed that promise, a commitment not just for the night, but for all the nights to come, for the lifetime they would share together on the land Zach had built and the family they would continue to nurture. 1 year later, on a warm spring evening, much like the one when Zach had proposed, the O'Connor family gathered on the porch of the Double Bar Ranch house. Ellie, now nearly 6 and growing tall, sat on the steps reading aloud from her primer to practice her letters. Zach sat in a rocking chair, cradling his 3-month-old son, Thomas Samuel O'Connor, who gazed up at his father with the same blue eyes that had been passed down from father to daughter and now to son. Temperance emerged from the house with a tray of lemonade, her figure only recently returned to normal after the birth of their second child. Setting the tray on the small table between the rocking chairs, she took her seat beside her husband, smiling as he carefully transferred the baby to her arms for his evening feeding. "He's getting so big," Zach commented proudly, watching as Temperance adjusted her shawl to nurse the infant discreetly. "Going to be tall like his grandpa Porter, I think." "Speaking of Pa, we had a letter today," Temperance said, reaching into her pocket with her free hand. "They're planning to visit next month, staying through the summer. Pa says he's been thinking about our suggestion of moving the whole family down here permanently." Zach's eyebrows rose in surprise. Samuel Porter considering leaving his Colorado farm? I never thought I'd see the day. "Well, with Jacob married to Hank's daughter now, and Matthew and Luke both interested in ranching more than farming, it makes sense. And Ma misses us terribly, especially with the new baby." "They'd be welcome," Zach said sincerely. "The neighboring property is still for sale. Plenty of room for all the Porters to establish themselves, if that's what they want." Temperance smiled, touched by his generosity toward her family despite the difficult history between them. "Who would have thought 5 years ago that we'd end up here, together with 2 beautiful children and possibly both our families united on the same land?" "Not me," Zach admitted, reaching over to stroke his son's downy head. "When you disappeared, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. Finding you again, discovering Ellie. It was like being given a second chance at life itself. And now look at us," Temperance said softly, gazing at their daughter, still absorbed in her reading, and the infant nursing contentedly at her breast. "A family. Just as we always dreamed." Zach took her free hand, squeezing it gently. "No, my love. Even better than we dreamed." As the Texas sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the small family sat together on their porch, surrounded by the land they loved and the promise of generations to come. The journey that had brought them to this moment had been long and often painful, filled with separation and longing. But the destination this life they had built together made every step worthwhile. Ellie looked up from her book, her face serious as she often was when contemplating important matters. "Papa, Mama, do you think Thomas will want to be a rancher like you when he grows up?" Zach chuckled, ruffling his daughter's dark curls. "He might, darling. Or he might want to be something else entirely. That's the beauty of the future. It's full of possibilities." "Like our future was," Temperance added, meeting her husband's loving gaze over their children's heads. "Sometimes the path isn't straight, and sometimes there are detours along the way. But if you keep faith and keep moving forward, you'll find your way home eventually." "We're home now, aren't we, Papa?" Ellie asked, leaning against her father's knee. "Yes, little one," Zach confirmed, his heart full as he looked at the family he had searched so long to find, the family that was now complete. "We're home now, and we always will be, as long as we're together." And in that moment, With the stars beginning to appear in the darkening Texas sky, Zachary O'Connor knew with absolute certainty that all the years of searching, all the pain of separation, had led to exactly where he was meant to be with the woman he loved and the children they had created together, building a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of love to overcome even the most formidable obstacles and bring healing where once there had been only hurt. "I'm here now," he had promised Ellie that first day, and it was a promise he intended to keep for all the days of his life, to be present, to be constant, to be the husband and father his family deserved. The past, with its mistakes and misunderstandings, was behind them. The future, bright with promise, stretched ahead. And the present, this perfect moment of family and fulfillment, was a gift he would cherish every day of his life.